question is about whether he should be investigating a segregated, individually managed super fund, or whether he should stick with one of the big common brand names that we see on footy jerseys and billboards around town. So this really is a trade-off between simplicity and availability on the one hand with the larger pooled funds, and the ability to get a better tax outcome and a more tailored, transparent outcome from a segregated account. So the significance behind this is that in a typical super fund, and for most people that means one of 20 large funds, which probably accounts for 70 or 80% of the super accounts in the country. They work by pooling everybody's money into a single pool, and that is generally fairly cheap to manage. And the disadvantage is that the pool pays tax rather than you as an individual. So the super fund adds up all their income and all their expenses, and including the 15% tax on your contributions, and pays the net amount as tax. It then has to decide how does it distribute that to each member. And that's not an exact science, and it's certainly not a very transparent or clearly disclosed mechanism. If the fund as a whole makes a loss for the year, which it could do 1 year in four, the fund as a whole won't necessarily be paying tax, but your account will still be charged your 15% contribution tax. And that will end up in some sort of reserve, which will then get divvied up among everyone else. If you pay an insurance premium for a group insurance policy issued by your super fund, you may or may not get the credit for the tax advantage, tax deduction for that insurance premium. You may or may not get a credit for the tax deduction on the administration cost of your account. And more importantly, you may or may not get the full benefit of the franking credit. So if you're predominantly invested in Australian shares, for example, you might expect your after-tax return as a 15% taxpayer to be greater than the pre-tax return. You may or may not see that in a pooled fund. And then, of course, at the point of retirement, the pool fund will trigger a capital gains tax cost that you might not incur if you have a segregated account. So most public offer super funds publish a unit price at which you buy or sell units in the fund, and that unit price includes a provision or accrual for the capital gains tax, which might be paid at some point in the future on an unrealised gain. So if you hold a share, for example, you pay tax on the dividend you receive this year in your normal income tax return, but you don't pay tax on the growth in the value of that share until you eventually sell it. But within a public offer fund, people are coming and going. Every month or every quarter, people put in their employer contribution. Some people roll over to another fund. So there has to be a mechanism for ensuring this is fair. And the way that's done is by accruing a provision for this tax. Now that's all fine during the accumulation phase, but at the point of retirement, you will have to redeem your accumulation units and subscribe for retirement units. Now that redemption of your accumulation units will incur that capital gains tax on the unrealised gains at that point. So if you've been in a fund for a long time, that could be 5% of your nest egg that's going to disappear in a poof of capital gains tax. You're not going to see that. It won't turn up in your personal tax return, and it's buried in the unit price. But that doesn't mean it's not eating away at your retirement nest egg. On the other hand, in a segregated account, you get your own franking credits. You get your own deduction for your insurance premium. You get a deduction for the costs of administering the fund. And so that after-tax return that you achieve reflects the performance of your fund, not a mishmash of millions of members. The downside of that, of course, is that it costs a little bit more to manage it. So the cost of the segregated platform, just the cost to run it, is a little bit more expensive. So you might find that your total costs to manage your fund do rise a little bit, not always. It certainly gives you the opportunity to invest in low-cost index funds or ETFs, which may very well lower the overall cost of your fund. But the platform itself will cost a little bit more. But what you achieve in terms of tax efficiency will generally pay off over a lifetime. So the net effect of that tax cost is about 0.3% a year, which may not sound a lot, but it mounts up over a lifetime, and it could be, after 10 or 15 years in an index growth portfolio, that could be 5% or more of your retirement nest egg. So this is something that you need to consider. So if your super fund balance is getting more than $50,000-$60,000 and you've got 5 or more years to go to retirement, this is something you need to seriously consider. So seek some professional advice.